Good morning. Welcome to the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Our minister, the Reverend Sarah Lawal, is on a well-deserved sabbatical until September. I'm Debra Smith, and along with Sarah Googe, we are your celebrants for today's service. And we are joined in the pulpit by Jaclyn-Rose Perez, a seminarian rather new to the Booth community. Their service today explores how like-minded, perhaps, ancestors can guide us through our contemporary struggles. I also want to thank those who are helping to bring your service to you today. Music director Carrie Bastian, Jem Emerson Page, our Director of Family Ministries, Nancy Harms, Program Support, our ushers, and our AV crew, Mike Lemieux and Samuel First. Welcome to those of you joining us virtually. Let's all turn around and wave to the little smiley face there. And welcome to all of you joining us in person. For those of you in the sanctuary, I ask you to please put your cell phones on worship mode. In joining us this morning, even if it is your first time, you are entering into a community dedicated to making visible in the world a profound love by nurturing spiritual growth, encouraging curiosity, enacting justice, and by tempering judgment with compassion and mercy. If that call speaks to your heart, you are welcome here. Whatever your spiritual heritage, whomever you love, however you traveled here, wherever you call home, your presence is a blessing. You are welcome here. We extend this welcome while solemnly acknowledging that we gather upon stolen land that once sustained a free people.
As we gather together, we acknowledge that the land upon which our church and homes exist is the ancestral land stolen from the people of the Shoshone-Bannock, the Shoshone-Paiute, Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai, and Nez Perce nations, along with many other tribes whose names have been lost in history. We acknowledge that our presence here today is founded upon the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples. With this acknowledgement, we wish to demonstrate our ongoing commitment to the work of dismantling the legacies of settler colonialism. We honor indigenous peoples' connection to the land and support their right to sovereignty.
We know it takes a lot of courage to cross the threshold and to enter into a new community, either in person or virtually. So to our newcomers, we're especially glad you joined us today. We invite you to introduce yourself in the chat, those of you online, so our community can warmly welcome you. There you'll find a link to the newcomer form that will keep you up to date with all that is happening in our fellowship. And we do have a lot happening right here, from book groups to adult classes to meditation to neighborhood pods, both in person and online. Those newcomers here in our sanctuary, you can find a link to that same newcomer form using the QR codes that you might have picked up on the welcome tables. We hope you'll stick around after the service and introduce yourselves, either in the Zoom breakout rooms or in our beautiful new coffee space, now open for to-go coffee that you can take home, or wander our lovely grounds where you can safely distance and take your masks off. It's right out there. I do have one announcement about an important upcoming event to highlight for the whole community. Please make plans to attend our Milestones Welcome Back celebration on Saturday, September 17th. We're planning lots of family-friendly activities to welcome Reverend Sarah back from her sabbatical, to welcome our minister intern Timothy, and to welcome each other back into community. Don't forget to think about milestones that you've experienced during this time period between April and September. There will be many ways to share them. Each month, our fellowship donates 25% of our unpledged plate offering to support our social justice ministries. For the month of August, it is the Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence, which works to be a leader in the movement to end violence against women and girls, men and boys across the lifespan before violence has occurred, because violence is preventable. We sustain our congregation, our worship events, and our many outreach ministries with our own gifts of money and talent. There are many ways to make a financial gift. Our website at boiseuu.org has a Give button in the top right-hand corner. The QR code on the bookmark will take you there too. You can download the Vanco Giving app on your iPhone, or you can put a check in the mail, or deposit one into the lock boxes on either entrance. However you choose to give, you nurture our community, and we are grateful.
As we enter into this time of worship, let us take a moment to breathe together. Fill your body with breath, knowing that our breath connects us to one another, to our bodies, and to our planet. Our breath offers us the opportunity for stillness, to tune into our spiritual center, to listen deeply to our own heart's longing. As we listen to the familiar words of Kendall Gibbons' poem, let the thous and thines speak to us in the voices of our own spiritual ancestors. Thou art the song of my heart in the morning. Thou art the dawn of truth in my soul. Thou art the dew of the roses adorning. Thou art the woven whole. Thine is the grace to be steadfast in danger. Thine is the peace that none can destroy. Thine is the face of the need-riven stranger. Thine are the wings of joy. Thou art the deep that did deepen me calling. Thou art a lamp where my feet shall tread. Thy way is steep past the peril of falling. Thou art my daily bread. Thine be the praise of my spirit uplifted. Thou art the sea to each flowing stream. Thine be the days that are gathered and sifted. Thou art the deathless dream.
Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestor's breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestor's breath in the voice of the waters. trees, they are in the groaning woods, they are in the crying grass, they are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestor's breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestor's breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast, they are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes, they are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestor's breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestor's breath in the voice of the waters.
At this hour, in small towns and big cities, in living rooms and ornate sanctuaries, many of our sibling Unitarian Universalists are also lighting a flaming chalice, reminding us that we are part of a great community of faith. As we light the chalice here in the sanctuary, if you in our virtual community have a chalice nearby, you are invited to light it with us this morning, then share in the chat where your chalice is lit. With our collective chalices lit in all our spaces, we offer you this call to worship from Kathleen McTeague. They are still with us. In the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward with us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, who struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us, have not melted into the dust and have not disappeared. They are still with us. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them choose the deeper path of living. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you'll join me in getting cozy for our time for all ages today. I wonder, how did you get your name? Maybe the name you use is one you share with a beloved relative or character or historical figure. Maybe it's a nickname that you've gotten along the way, or it's a name that you crafted uniquely for yourself. We all have different stories for how we got our name, and it's important to share those stories because our names connect us to the people who have come before us, our ancestors, and to who we want to be in the world. Our story this morning is Alma and How She Got Her Name by Juana Martinez Neal, and it's going to help us explore how we can honor the legacies and the stories of our names and ask, what story would you like to tell? Let's listen.
Alma Sofia Esperanza Jose Pura Candela had a long name. Too long, if you asked her. My name is so long, Daddy, it never fits, Alma said. Come here, he said. Let me tell you the story of your name. Then you can decide if it fits. Sophia was your grandmother, he began. She loved books, poetry, and jasmine flowers, and of course me. She was the one who taught me how to read. We see this photograph of her next to this long tree, and we see that tree sitting next to their reading chair. An item from her great-grandma, Sophia. I love books and flowers, and you too, Daddy. I am Sophia. Esperanza was your great-grandmother, he continued. She hoped to travel, but never left the city where she was born. Her only son grew up to cross the 7 seas. Wherever her sailor son went, so did Esperanza's heart. They have a trunk with the initials EDM, and I think E stands for Esperanza. The world is so big. I want to go see it, Daddy. You and me together. I am Esperanza. We see this trunk is full of objects and trinkets from around the world. The Esperanza collected. Jose was my father, Alma's daddy said. He was an artist with a big family, like many people had back then. Early each morning, he walked to the mountains and the plazas to paint everyday life. Sometimes I went along. Your grandfather taught me to see and love our people. We see a portrait of Jose up in the corner. I wake up early every day and I draw a lot too. This morning I drew a kitty cat for you, Daddy. I am Jose. Pura was your great aunt. She believed that the spirits of our ancestors are always with us, watching over us. When you were born, she tied a red string around your wrist, a charm to keep you safe. We see hanging on the wall is a ornate heart with some flames coming out of it, a sacred heart. Hello, Pura. I am Alma. Candela was your other grandmother. She always stood for what was right. Here she is in a protest with her children. I am Candela. I love the story of my name. Now tell me about Alma, Daddy. Where does that come from? I picked the name Alma just for you. You are the first and the only Alma. You will make your own story. Alma Sofia Esperanza Jose Pura Candela. That's my name, and it fits me just right. I am Alma, and I have a story to tell.
May your mind be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
Our reading this morning is something of a reflection. We often have celebrants' reflections, but in this case, it is a reflection taken from a New York Times interview of Catherine Bond Stockton, a University of Utah gender studies professor who describes her own gender identity and sexual preference as a dandy butch. In this excerpt, she explains how she began to come to terms with her feelings, she says, like a boy who wanted to kiss girls, as she develops her own story. She said, I am one of those unusual people who was raised Unitarian by two left-leaning Democratic Unitarian parents, but very much formed by their time, as I think they would say. And I met an evangelical girl who was the most beautiful girl I had ever met. And I thought she also seemed smart and interesting and funny, and she played instruments, and she was good at sports. And at some point, it began to click for me that by accepting Jesus in my heart, that was the language at the time, still is for some people, that in some ways that could be proof to me that I was a good person. Because unfortunately, by that time, I had heard that homosexuals, that was the word in play, homosexuals were evil. And I was trying to figure out how in the world, though I did not feel myself to be evil, how in the world I could find a place where I could feel good. The other interesting effect of evangelicalism was a rescue for me because, in part, of the sex segregation. The pesky boys go one way, the girls go the other way, and I got to go with the girls. And in a very interesting way, particularly early on, I felt like a boy concealed in a girl gang. And I felt that I would be learning to become a gay girl by being evangelical. So lots of intriguing contradictions in that move. And I remember having a dress that I was very fond of because my mother called it my sword dress. It had a sword on the belt. And she was sort of able to convince me that Robin Hood would be very proud to wear that jumper. So there's a way in which I think my mom very sweetly and tenderly understood something about this. But again, it's not their problem, particularly in that time period, that a parent could solve for me. But I will tell you, as I remember, a particular terror. It would always be on Sunday when we would come home from the Unitarian church, and I'd be wearing patent leather shoes, and I remember just the steel cold horror in my heart of thinking that any of my boy friends in the neighborhood would see me get out of that car. And I would literally run from the car into the house because that sense of shame was so severe. Catherine Bond Stockton's story reminds me to do better than just being well-meaning. I must learn how to reduce the ways our culture shames people because of their sexual and gender expressions. May it be so.
Each week, we take time to acknowledge the many joys among us and to grieve our many sorrows and losses, so that we might lift that burden for each other and receive the blessing of community. A reminder that you can send us your joys and sorrows at any time via the link on our website. Your bookmark QR code will take you right there. Our virtual community will continue to share joys and sorrows in the chat. We combine our collective joys and sorrows each month and share them in a community-wide email. It is through our sharing with one another that we forge deep bonds of community and connection. I'm happy to have two joys to share with you this morning. Ken Fries wrote to us with the following message. Last month, I informed you that my wife, Janet, was in the ICU at St. Luke's on life support. Asked for your concern, support, and love for Janet. Today, I'm pleased to tell you she is out of the ICU and has made steady progress in recovering her health. Next week, she will move from Vibra Hospital to a rehabilitation center in the area. It is a most amazing recovery. It will be a joy when she is able to come home in a few weeks. I feel gratitude and a new spring in my step. And from Kevin Richmond, a joy. He wrote, I helped Veronica move into the dorm at the University of Miami today, and Audrey has her Honors College welcome program at Boise State this week. My amazing young ladies are starting college. So happy and excited for both of them. We delight in these joys, knowing that some of you bring a burden to us this morning. If you are holding someone in your heart, I invite you to speak their name aloud into this community of love, that we may hold them with you. May the arms of this community hold all of our joys and sorrows, those named, and those that remain silent, close to our hearts. May we feel the grace that surrounds us and be transformed by the spirit of life and love, with warmth to celebrate our joys and gentleness to soothe our aching hearts. Breathe with me. Fill your body with breath. Breathe into this sacred space. Breathe with this beloved community filled with loving kindness. Breathe with wholeheartedness. Listen to what is calling you in the silence. Jaclyn-Rose Perez was born and raised here in the Treasure Valley. They are now attending seminary through the Iliff School of Theology. Their passions in life have changed plenty over their 30 years, but a common thread has been striving for social justice and equity, a theme they treasure from the Booth community.
Good morning, Booth family. Oh, that was so warm. Thank you. Thank you for having me here to share this week. This is my first time writing and giving a sermon outside of recording one on video for school this past quarter. So please be gentle. I will share that I certainly feel nervous, as I do not have much public speaking experience, and lately I have been lacking a lot of energy and confidence. But I know I am not alone, and I have felt the support of this community in so many ways. So when I inevitably stumble over some words, I hope that we can come together, take a breath, and give thanks that we get to be human together in this moment. I will note that I touch on some hardships of religious and bodily trauma, mental illness and substance abuse, and queer phobia. If these subjects are hard for you, I find no offense in you needing to take a moment away to care for your heart. If you need to step out or press mute on Zoom, I very much understand. Thankfully, I believe there's far more hope contained than anything else. Today, I'm going to share about my connection to an ancestor, not one bonded by blood, but by our shared experiences of capital S, spirit, and lowercase g, gender. While oftentimes we may think of ancestors as those of whom we are related to via familial bonds, I practice spiritual ancestral lineages as well. My spiritual ancestors include people such as Thich Nhat Hanh, my grandmother Rachel and Aunt Brenda, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, my childhood cats who have gone before me, Jesus, Octavia Butler, Buddha, and others. These are beings who lived a life that taught my spirit lessons, and I now consider my ancestors. I do not need to be related by blood to be connected to my ancestors, which means that there are so many. But today I'm going to focus on just one particular one. When I think about creativity and art and expression, I often think of writers and authors, those who have the ability to create worlds beyond our own, futures and timelines parallel to those that we exist in now, and stories of characters we could imagine running into on the street or on the walkway of a spaceship headed to an exoplanet. As an undergraduate, I studied English literature, so I'm adding this note here to admit my own personal biases towards the written word, but in no way do I hold it with more or less importance than creativity and art expressed with any other medium, especially seeing as the written word isn't the only source nor the only way a story can be told. I just happen to live with a heart slightly more interwoven with storytelling that happens in such a fashion. So I'm going to share with you things I've learned about a specific author, one that I will liken to a thread woven through parts of my life with impacts that become more important over time. And to understand how this particular thread within my life is woven, subtle at first, then more and more apparent, we would have to start pretty early in my life. I was raised an evangelical Christian and did not know at the time the impact that a UU ancestor would have or could have on my life. It would have been impossible for me to know. I unfortunately can't see that far into the future. But it was almost as if the universe placed them in my timeline like a small thread that holds together parts of the much larger quilt. This thread can be seen speckled through the quilt, and when you take a look, its glimmer at first is hidden, but the more you focus, the more it makes its way to the front of your perspective. Louisa May Alcott, whom I will address as Lou, was just this glimmering thread for me. At the time in my life when Lou May Alcott and I first met, metaphorically, of course, I would not have been able to see just who I was to become, who I am now, as that person, my present being, was persecuted and hated all throughout my childhood. I pushed myself away for many years, believing that I deserved to go to hell, a place that I believed to be real and eternal, where I would forever be separated from the rest of my family because of who I am. I was taught that Jesus forgave our sins, but that he didn't forgive that. I had to be the one to change who I was at my very core, let alone even think about exploring more of who I knew deep down that I am. Each week in Sunday school and youth group, a new level of this belief, of this trauma, was revealed. I was taught lessons of a God who hated who I was, who I have become, and who I am today. And so when I left the church at 17, I thought I left all of the oppressive foundations that were poured into my life, but I did not. I ran away from the trauma, the feelings, the gender expectation taught into me, the heteronormativity that I was told was the only way to happiness and that I had to enact it to be worthy of love. I ran away from all of that and I ran right into the arms of substance abuse and alcohol abuse and turning my body into, well, a space that carried more and more trauma rather than working through the harmful beliefs that I was taught. I couldn't handle the hardships of working through the harm, so instead I numbed it for a decade. I didn't have role models growing up who told me that who I was worthy of love, who I was not going to a place called hell, was not an abomination. Even many of my ancestors by blood were people who I knew believed that I did not deserve to live happily without changing who I am. I did not have role models at the time who were like me, at least none that I knew at the time were queer. But in the background, that thread of a queer ancestor was being woven into my life. Lou May Alcott is one person who was a role model on the margins, peripherally present, and perpetually queer. But at the time, I didn't know such things about them. Lou, author of Little Women and other novels, is a UU ancestor. They may not have addressed themselves as such at the time, especially since our faith didn't merge into UU until the 60s, but they held beliefs that are at the foundation of our faith. Born in 1832 in Pennsylvania, Lou was child to transcendentalist parents and had 3 sisters. Lou's novel, Little Women, is said to be more biographical than not, with Josephine, Jo, March, being Lou's counterpart within the story. If you have not been introduced to Little Women, you may not know that Jo March, protagonist of the novel, breaks gender expectations, wanting to have published writing but coming up against the sexism of the world of publishers. She is adventurous and outgoing and yearns for a more equal world between the sexes. You may not know that Jo declares on the first pages of the novel that she cannot get over her disappointment in not being a boy. And in all honesty, I did not know this fact because I have not read the novel. But while writing this sermon, I looked at quotes within the novel, and it opened up my perspective on Lou by quite a bit. The majority of my acquaintance with Lou May Alcott and the world of Jo March is from the 1994 movie version starring Susan Sarandon, swoon, and Winona Ryder, also swoon. Watching this movie became a family tradition between me and my mother, the most important person in my life. Now, I want to tell you about my mom and about our connection because I think it creates such a depth for a tradition as seemingly menial as watching a film together. My mother had me at age 23, raised in the church that became the harbinger of so much trauma. And she left the church before I did. She left the church physically before I did, but I left it spiritually before she and my father took their own steps of spiritual formation, deconstruction, and further questioning. She was raised primarily by her older sister, who later became one of my school teachers, who inspired me to get the undergraduate degree that I did, and is now one of the most important ancestors that my mother and I have. May she rest in peace. My mother held me, I might start crying. My mother held me in a hug when I found out that I was pregnant at 19, and she held my hand in the procedure room when I had a medical abortion. A formative moment in both of our lives. She has been there for me in the emergency room after I tried to take my own life, watching and housing me for the 3 days afterwards to be sure that I was going to be okay through the Christmas season. She has supported me these past almost 3 years as I have made my way onto my path of sobriety and recovery. She drove me to my fallopian tube removal surgery, and she was the first person I told about my hopes and plans for top surgery. She is one of my very best friends, and it has not always been this way. The teenage years were hard, to say the least. But these days, we have a bond that means the world to me, obviously. One where my hopes for the future would include having a home with a mother-in-law apartment for her to one day live in. And the day that she becomes an ancestor, I do not even want to think about. So our traditions mean a lot, even if it is just watching a movie. So you see, when we watch it each Christmas season, cry at different moments, and remember our loved ones whom we have lost that are mirrored through the moments and scenes depicted within the film, as if Lou and the characters he created lived moments of our lives, speaking to us and our experience through a part of time that we will never directly know. How can it be that someone who lived a couple hundred years before me could know so much of mine and my mother's emotional beings, could experience so much of what I can relate to and express it so well through a novel, could be interpreted so well through the screen, could reach into my heart and open so many pathways for my tears year after year, all with the same story. Lou's association to the Unitarian Universalist tradition is not our only vein of connection. I relate to Lou because I have found my way from the trauma of the church that I was raised within to the walls, both physical and digital, of the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, like holding on to the brightly colored thread and being pulled into spaces of healing. The thread becoming larger now, almost like a rope. I am now connected to Lou via a shared faith tradition, but almost deeper than that. I feel that I can relate to Lou in light of their expansive experience with gender that has been illuminated over time. So yes, that's right, Louisa May Alcott might better be addressed more often the way that I have within this sermon as Lou. And there's plenty of evidence to naturally bring me to this conclusion. Can you tell I've written a lot of college papers? Near the middle of April, I was doom scrolling through Twitter, as one does in these times, and stumbled upon a thread about Lou's gender expansive experience. Author and podcast host Peyton Thomas tweeted about the research that they have conducted on Lou May Alcott. Thomas argues that Lou was trans, although at the time they may not have had the vocabulary to speak on gender expansion in such a way. Shoot, when I was 10, a mere 20 years ago, I did not have the language to express my experience with gender either. I've barely learned more about gender expansive language over the past 5 to 10 years. So in letters to family and friends, Louisa is addressed as Lou, L-O-U, Lou, L-U, and Louie, L-O-U-Y, almost exclusively according to Thomas's findings. Lou's yearnings to be a soldier and fight alongside men in the Civil War is mirrored in Joe's character in Little Women, as well as in findings in the letters he wrote at the time. Thomas also brings to light Alcott's sexual orientation, which they definitively state as not of a heterosexual persuasion. They believe that Lou had at least some attraction to women and was bisexual and or asexual, yet another way Lou and I relate. While we as Unitarian Universalists embrace our queer members and the queer community, Lou's community may have felt different. But all of this is to say, Lou was not only a UU ancestor, but a queer UU ancestor. While I did not know about any of this a mere 6 months ago, it feels glaringly obvious looking back and combining the critical lens I was taught in undergrad with the contents of the film's portrayal of Lou's work and the quotes that I have read throughout the novel. But I do not have a time machine, I cannot speak with Lou directly, and I unfortunately do not have the means to fly to Boston to read through his letters myself, as they're contained within libraries in Massachusetts. What I do have are my experiences as a queer, non-binary, gender-expansive individual, my tradition of watching Little Women each Christmas season or any time that I'm missing my mom a lot, and a deep feeling in my heart surrounding the connections between myself and Lou, as if they have been a spiritual guide walking alongside me in this life this whole time, as if they have been a thread glittering through each chapter of my life, growing stronger and stronger until becoming so bright and illuminated I can't help but to see my own reflection glimmering within it. And as we have known Lou by many different names now, Louisa, Lou, Louie, etc., And you have all known me as Jax, which is how I have known myself for the past 10 years. Some have known me as Jackie, Jacquelina, Jaclyn, and others. All that evolves and changes. So for me today, there's a new change that I would like you all to be some of the first to know about, and I will be trying out Jaclyn-Rose for the foreseeable future, as I believe it better encompasses my being and my heart at this point in my life and in my experience. Jax is retired. So thank you for creating a community where I can feel safe enough to share all of this with you. Before we part this morning, I want to leave you with a reminder, a pleading from my heart, a souvenir to take with you as we move through this week. The queer community isn't a monolith, and my experience isn't that of another, but it's something that connects us even through time. So many of us, no matter our gender identity or sexual orientation, are looking for community. What is community? What makes a community? For me, it is love, or at least includes as much of it as imperfect humans can. Forgiveness, or what I like to better call a really deep attempt at transformative justice. And it is not just fitting in, but belonging. And it takes time and patience. So much patience. As our UU faith connects members who are queer to those that are not, and to those who do not yet know, so too does our UU history connect us to our UU ancestors. So have you been impacted by a particular UU ancestor? I would love to know, because there are so many that I have yet to meet, and so many more threads becoming ropes in our quilts to hold on to through these tough times. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaclyn-Rose, for those heartfelt words. As we move into a time of prayer and meditation, let us open our hearts to hear the words of UU trans minister Sean Parker Dennison. Let us remember our biological ancestors, those who made a way for us, who sowed and planted, worked and built, weeded and harvested. Even though they were far from perfect, they did the best they could, and we are here because of them. We would not be who we are without all of them, their mistakes, and their triumphs. And let us remember our spiritual ancestors. These are our chosen line, the thinkers, artists, and rabble-rousers that we take courage from and hope to emulate. These are the lineage of our hearts and souls. These are the ministers who preached truth when it was unpopular and dangerous. These are the artists who reveal truths of naked emperors and pierce the veil of apathy and numbness. These are the gender outlaws who trusted who they knew themselves to be and began to build a world that could hold them. These are the abolitionists, the suffragettes, the civil rights pioneers who rallied to the side of the broken, the oppressed, the abused. Remembering these spiritual ancestors is an opening for courage and for the strength that comes from knowing that we are not alone.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on the shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Well, I got eyes in the back of my head, I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. To you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gotta keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving to that separating line. I'm winning through muddy waters. You know I got a made up mind, and I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I'll fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gotta keep on keeping on. And I know what's around the bend might be hard to face 'cause I'm alone, and I just might fail, but Lord knows I've tried. Sure as stars fill up the sky. Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gotta keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gotta keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. I hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gotta keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. I go to prepare a place for you. 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 I invite you to rise in body or spirit and to place your hands on your hearts for our closing blessing. As we prepare to walk out into the wider world from this place of deep fellowship, let us hear the call of our ancestors, both those whose DNA we share and those we name our spiritual ancestors. May their words invite us to think deeply, to ponder the great mysteries, to
to seek both knowledge and wisdom. May their deeds spark in us the fire of courage, that we may strive for a more just world. May their lives inspire in us the will to live our lives, so that those who come after may choose to call us their spiritual ancestors. Blessed are we all. Go in peace.